None of the content on this or any episode of the Kratom Science Podcast, Kratom Science Journal Club, or on any page of kratomscience.com is intended, nor should it be considered, medical claims or medical advice. This is the Kratom Science Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Gallagher, blog and social media writer for kratomscience.com. Your source for all things Kratom. It's a privilege to welcome Jon Griggs. He's a former law enforcement officer who was involved in a whistleblower case. He's here to talk about possible police corruption in the Marshall Price case, the man who was killed 3 weeks after being sentenced for 10 years in prison for carrying too much Kratom. You were former law enforcement. Can you talk about that? I guess you were a corrections officer, and were you like a police officer as well?
Yeah. I started out really young when I was like 21 and got into this business really early and worked in varying capacities from corrections officer to police officer. Then I went to be a private investigator for quite a while. And contracted actually for 10 months with the Secret Service, working in the Gulf. So that was pretty fun. But that was contract private investigation work, and then went back into law enforcement. And then the last job I had was an investigator for the Department of Corrections, and was a gang task force officer for them. And that was a whole level of crazy because I got involved in whistleblowing and ended up in a high-profile lawsuit against the state of Missouri and won that. Man, it's all over the internet. It was a whole just a wild set of circumstances that I landed myself in, but it's fine though. It gave me a leg up. So
yeah. So what happened? Was that a result of you being attacked in the prison?
Yeah. Well, there was officers that were smuggling heroin in.
Oh,
they
okay.
were bringing heroin into inmates and selling it to them. Which man, these guys are in treatment. They're locked up. They're supposed to be rehabilitating.
Yeah.
And these guys are selling them heroin, and the administration would do nothing about it because they didn't want investigators coming in there and poking around at them. So they just fire them and get them out the door. And I would get a hold of the prosecutors, write probable cause statements up, all kinds of stuff, and it was bringing too much attention to them. So they had to get rid of me.
So when you were attacked by an inmate, that they were kind of in on it.
Yeah, there was no way to prove that, but
yeah,
I think so. I got attacked by two inmates, and I fought both of them off, and that was wild. It was pretty wild, but we had a big lawsuit and all that, but it worked out pretty well. So these agencies can act really shady, man, and do some really shady stuff, but eventually, if you see it through and get in a courtroom, they have to sit in a chair and answer some very uncomfortable questions.
I guess it's related to what's going on now that I want to talk about in a minute, but I'm just wondering, when was your involvement at Kratom? When did that begin? Was it after all this stuff happened?
Around 2016.
So that would be a couple years later.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, in that whole kind of time frame, yeah.
What led you to find out about Kratom?
I'd heard about it for a while. I'm kind of into natural medicine and that type of thing, and I found out that it could be effective and worked pretty well. I was going through just so much stress and anxiety and problems, and I was actually in I broke 5 bones in my face in an accident. My nose and cheekbones, had to go through some pretty extensive surgeries and all that. So
damn,
a whole lot of things just happened at one time. So the Kratom really helped a lot with that, a year of surgeries and that type of thing. And then what I really use it for is post-traumatic. That's what I found works better than anything.
Is it from when you were attacked, or is it from just that career?
Just 12 years of compounded stuff. Worked accidents with decapitations and that type of thing. So it's just years of compounding.
Do they give you any kind of treatment in a job like that, or as a law enforcement officer in general? Because I know a lot of them had problems with this stuff.
Man, it's really kind of not. Well, back then, and it kind of depends on whatever you're into, but they're starting to. My brother's a cop, and they're kind of starting to. But once you deem somebody not, that they can't meet the essential functions because of something, they got to get you out of the job. So it's kind of like the elephant in the room,
Yeah, so if you say you have a problem, then you risk your career right there.
Yeah, and it's
a shame.
It is. It really is. And I know that a lot of cops act the way they act because, they've got some serious underlying issues, and they're afraid to have them addressed. And it's just not good, man. It's not good at all. I don't know how a society that we live in today has let something like this go for so long.
Yeah. I mean, especially with all the problems that have been coming up in the media over the last few years with, shootings and now that cameras are everywhere, you can see when either the stresses that police are under or how they act out because of the stress. So, they get scared and shoot first, ask questions later, and you wonder what goes behind that. Nobody really talks about that.
Yeah, no, nobody wants to do that. They should. It's a conversation that we all should be having. I'm not pro-police. I'm not against the police. My brother's a cop, and I still have to work with these people. I own an armed security company now. And,
okay.
I've got to work with them. But having gone through all the experiences I've gone through and had some of these people just flat out lie. I don't know, man. It's just really subjective. And it's on a person-to-person basis with law enforcement, with me now anyways. And then we run into something like this in Arkansas. It's just, man, it's hard to wrap your whole mind around.
Yeah, with Marshall Price, it's crazy. Now, I know you put in a open records request for this case, and what's been the response to that?
We haven't gotten one. Mike Overstreet and I were talking for weeks before Marshall was killed, and a week before Marshall was killed, some of the circumstances around the original traffic stop just sounded really bizarre to me. They didn't make sense. So me and Mike agreed, we need to see the footage from this body cam and the dash cam on the original traffic stop, because I heard two different stories. One, I heard Marshall did not have illuminated license plate tags, and I also heard that Marshall didn't have functioning brake lights. Well, I know the illumination license plate tag trick pretty well, and a lot of police will use that to initiate a traffic stop. It's really unconstitutional. They'll use that to initiate a traffic stop when they say, I can see that it's working now, but when I was behind you, I couldn't see it too well. Well, what they're doing is they're stopping you, and they're looking for probable cause indicators for various things. They're smelling for marijuana if you live in a state that's still authoritarian dictatorship that doesn't have decent laws. They're looking for the smell of pot so they can get into your vehicle without having to have a warrant for it, or they're looking for the smell of alcohol, or they're looking for something in plain sight. And a lot of cops, especially in smaller agencies, will use a trick like that to perform a traffic stop to get some type of probable cause to get in your vehicle.
In the case with Marshall, reading through all the documents I could that were public, it just sort of seems like, because they busted him right after he came back over the border, he had a history where I guess he was a heroin addict, according to, I think a couple of his daughters mentioned that, because Kratom actually helped him stay off of heroin. So he had a couple of priors that were like non-violent. I think he had non-prescription Suboxone, which is opiate possession. That's pretty low down on the totem pole. You know, it's clearly he's not trying to get high, he's trying to get better. But it seems like they might have seen him going across the border and they knew what he was doing, I guess, and they were just waiting to bust him there, especially with this broken taillight excuse.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened. They were waiting on it, and I don't know exactly when they had. That kind of jumped in my brain last week when we were talking to the family was, and they'll use this in smaller areas, is, they'll have publicity stunts right before elections. So,
okay, yeah.
What I was thinking is that they had a primary sometime in May of 21.
21, okay.
This would serve to, now I haven't checked into that. I could be completely wrong about that. Or they just wanted the publicity period for a large bust. Cops will do that, from time to time. Just like, oh, hey, we're out here using your tax money appropriately. We have MRAPs and we have things that we don't even need. We've got bayonets for our AR-15s. Yeah. But, we're using our tax dollars appropriately for you guys out here doing stuff like this. So I believe you're exactly right. That's what they had, because Marshall was stopped a month prior with the Kratom on him, and one of the cops was like, oh, that's Kratom, it's not a big deal. So clearly they knew what was going on here, and according to Julian and Sheena, Marshall, they brought him back with the Kratom, like he was functioning. He was like Sheena said, he was alive again. He was Marshall again.
And this was after, I guess, an extended period of him being into heroin. True.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. The crazy thing is Marshall ended up back down there. We didn't find this out till last week. Marshall ended up back down there because he had some old warrant from years ago. And he got stopped in Michigan, where he was working as a detox specialist at a treatment facility. So he got stopped, and Arkansas had a warrant out for him, and they freaking extradited him from Michigan to Arkansas.
Wow!
And yeah, that was shocking to me that they would extradite all the way across the freaking country.
Yeah.
On a warrant. And the crazy thing is when he got there, the warrant was so old that it was lost in the system, and he sat in jail for 3 months. Imagine this.
Oh my
God. This is 90 days of your time. I worked in a jail. I hated spending 8 freaking hours in there.
Yeah.
This poor guy spends 3 months in there, and the family's calling and calling. They get a hold of an attorney for him, and he's like, yeah, it's taken care of. It's disposed of. We can go and get him out of there.
Wow. So he was brought from Michigan to Arkansas?
Yeah, by the cops.
Yeah. And what was the warrant for?
Dude, they said that it was an administrative error.
Oh, my God. That is crazy. It wasn't even for anything. That's insane.
It was what I'm guessing was it was an old FTA, an old failure to appear at maybe a traffic stop or some type of summons. And what they did is since he was in Michigan, they ruled it as him being, it's probably for misdemeanor, something very simple, and they ruled it as him being a friggin' fugitive from justice.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and these, everybody who listens to this should think about that. Like, when you're electing, this is the county sheriff's department, folks. When you're electing these people, this is who you're putting in there. All right. You think that they care about you for 1 minute because, you've known them for 10 or 15 years or whatever? We'll do the same thing to you.
That's insane. I mean, because when you look at this guy's priors, it was, like I said, possession of non-prescription Suboxone and failure to pay child support. It all looks like a guy that had a drug problem, and essentially that's what he was. But he doesn't have any violence, nothing like that. I think he possessed a firearm after he was convicted of the possession of non-prescription Suboxone, so he's technically a felon. Probably somebody didn't tell him, hey, you can't own a firearm anymore. So they got him on that. I mean, that doesn't mean he's a violent criminal.
Or he could have been living with somebody that had one.
True.
They still charged him with it.
I'm still trying to understand, like, why are they picking on him? Like, what did he... Is he that terrible? I mean, they're going all the way to Michigan to drag him back for some misdemeanor or something like that.
Yeah, it's wild, and it seems like he had put his life together at this point. Like, things clicked for him. You know, the guy had a drug problem. You know, I know many people that do. Many people use Kratom to square that away. And yeah, you know, he was okay. That's the worst part about this whole thing and the picking on him. I think that when you have these little tyrannical agencies like this, they just do whatever they can get away with. I've heard stories from the family now that there's been multiple inmates that have died in that jail, and it's just whatever they can pull off.
Yeah, there was a commenter on one of the ones I put out about this, and she said, yeah, my son has permanent injuries for the rest of his life because he was life flighted out of there because he was beaten. There was another death from 2021 that was on the news. Never a follow-up on it, though. I mean, they had a state police investigation like they're doing now. At least from that news source, I searched it, and there was never a follow-up. Another person commented on one of the articles and said, yeah, they beat inmates in there all the time. And it just seems like there's a lot of people coming out and being like, oh, yeah, I know somebody that got their ass beaten there and whatnot. So that's pretty crazy. That sometimes happens in Allegheny County Jail too, and I'm still trying to get hold of that councilwoman that I wanted to interview for that, because I wanted to see like how if anybody got justice out of that and how they went about it. Maybe provide some information. I wanted to talk about just in case anybody else gets in the situation and wants to do it, like, how do you go about requesting open records requests? And are they like technically legally required to turn over police camera footage? It's under the Arkansas Freedom of Information Act. You forwarded me that request.
You know what's wild with that is I just got an answer on that today, and it was not even from the sheriff's department. It was from a different agency. One of the police officers that was showing his butt out there dancing and all that. I looked into him. Yeah, he was decertified. Jamie Floyd, the guy was decertified, and we put his name out there. He was decertified. Something happened, so I wrote the Commission on Law Enforcement Standards in Arkansas so that I could see what he was decertified for. Well, I got an email response today back saying that only Arkansas citizens can request public records on officials in Arkansas. So that's the first time I've ever run into that. I live back in Kentucky. I spent most of my career in St. Louis. I'm from Kentucky. I moved home to Kentucky after my lawsuit was concluded. And I've done open records requests from here to the state of Missouri. I've done them to the state of Illinois, Tennessee. And this is all for business with my armed security company. And I've never run into that issue before, ever. They've just, hey, here's the records. I've had them say, hey, if you would give us an extra week to compile them, we're busy, we got people out sick, like, whatever, cool, you're working with me. That's fine, I can deal with it.
Yeah.
I've never had anybody flat out say, no, you're not a citizen, we're not going to give them to you. So I replied back and said, well, the media does this all the time.
Yeah.
Probably not going to hear back on that. But we can have the family. All we got to do is I send it to them and just say, hey, put your name on this.
Yeah, and as far as I know, they're working with a pretty good lawyer, too, I think, that is probably going to want all this stuff for any kind of lawsuit they bring about, I suppose.
Yeah, he seems like, I read into him, he seems like the type of lawyer you want. got a little bit of experience with lawyers. My lawyer was really eccentric, and he's a judge now, which is great because the guy is just full throttle. Like, he's a tough guy, and he's a good dude, and he cares about one thing, and that's the truth with a capital T.
Yeah.
And he goes about things a little differently, but it seems like this attorney is kind of the same way, man. He seems like a real wild card. I was reading some stuff on him all over the internet, and this is the type of person that you want.
It sounds kind of like Saul Goodman.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what you want.
Well, at least that's good. It's just, the whole thing's just horrifying and terrible. This police officer, I wanted to explain it for people listening that don't know what's going on, but the family had a protest last Friday night. I'm probably going to put this up tomorrow, so it'll still be last Friday, the 16th of December. This is a week after Marshall was killed. So they protested at the Greene County Jail in Paragould, Arkansas. So from what I heard, there was a police officer or jailer or guard, somebody who was in an SUV. He's playing loud music and dancing and honking his horn while they were protesting their father, sister, brother, son being killed. Yeah, what was the story with him? Did you find out anything about this guy?
I kind of dug around into him. He's bounced from agency to agency, which is not uncommon with people like that. They'll get in trouble in one area, and they're like, well, look, man, kind of run your course here, but hey, down the road, they might pick you up. So the guys I looked at his employment history, he's bounced from department to department. And one thing that law enforcement agencies don't like is negative publicity on their cops, because once again, it's your tax money, and that's all shielded. So they want to show people like, no, we're out here doing great things. So they sweep a lot of this misconduct under the rug, and it never sees the light of day. He's obviously a problem child, and he did lose his certification. I did find that out. That is a fact. He is no longer a certified police officer for the state of Arkansas. He's now a jailer. He's now a corrections officer. So that's usually the end of the line. And it indicates to me that he's got enough time in to where he's close to retirement, and he's finishing it out in that jail. And I've seen it here, the local sheriff's department. Somebody will get in trouble and do something ignorant, and they'll put them in the county jail. And that's where they'll continue that. They'll lose quite a bit of money, and they'll continue their career out there, which is terrible. It's extremely dangerous because it's putting a bad actor in a bad situation in jail. These county jails, it's not just exclusive to Paragould, Arkansas. There's massive problems at the one here. Mm-hmm. There's problems, and like you said, in Allegheny, there's problems in county jails all over the place. And it's these administrations are just, it's mind-blowing that we live in the United States. Conditions are similar or worse to freaking Abu Ghraib. We saw that in the media just ad nauseum. Okay, I get it. It was a terrible human rights abuse. All right, never should have happened. Those guys should have been punished, which they all weren't punished. It all kind of fell back on one staff sergeant. They swept it all under the rug. This is going on in the United States, and it's going on widespread.
Against American citizens, too. I mean, even if they did something terrible, it's still, that's how we're supposed to be different than countries that are oppressive tyrannies. We're supposed to have due process for people who are in prison and even prosecuted.
Absolutely. And that just, you're an American citizen. You have constitutional rights. And one of those rights is the Eighth Amendment to serve against cruel and unusual punishment.
So the prosecutor it was his firm, Keith Cressman. I don't know if he worked directly on the case to prosecute Marshall and sentence him to 10 years in prison for carrying Kratom. Just to be clear to everybody, he was charged with trafficking because he had over 200 grams. And, I mean, everybody that listens to this probably knows that is not that much. I got like a pound in my closet. 200 grams is not that much at all.
It's a month's supply.
Yeah, probably about a month for somebody that that probably uses every day. So this guy, Keith Cressman, but he's an Arkansas prosecutor. He's pretty prominent, and he actually, the West Memphis 3, if anybody hasn't seen the documentary Paradise Lost, that's in West Memphis, Arkansas, kind of the same region where all this stuff happened with Marshall. It was like 3 teenagers that were in the wrong place, the wrong time, and they basically got blamed for murdering 3 little kids because they like to wear heavy metal t-shirts. And it became like a high-profile thing, and a lot of musicians whose t-shirts they wore came out in support of them, but they still did 18 years in prison. So the same prosecutor that prosecuted Marshall, earlier this year, he blocked the West Memphis 3 from introducing DNA into a lawsuit because that DNA is, of course, going to exonerate them. Then the people are going to have to admit they put 3 innocent men in jail for 18 years. So this guy just, he's just shameless. And he put out a press release after Marshall got sentenced to 10 years, which was above the minimum. Like, the minimum was 96 months, and he got 120 months. So they gave him 2 more years, I think, than the minimum, which is, I don't know why the jury did that. So I'm just wondering, it goes along with what you were saying before, where they're trying to show, hey, we're doing this thing with your tax dollars, getting these evil drug traffickers off the streets. And they even petitioned to keep out of the fact that he went right over the border and bought it in Missouri where it was legal. They kept that out of the case. Have you had any contact with his public defender at all?
No, I haven't, and that would probably be a good route to go, but I believe that the magnitude of this, they're probably not going to talk to anybody at this point. That show trial, that's like a Soviet-era show trial, man. That blocking evidence for the jury. They basically sequestered the jury and told them that they couldn't research what Kratom was. I mean, I know that there are things that happen in lawsuits where, or in trials where, people will be asked, don't research the person that you're going to convict because you're going to get, you might have a different influential outcome from it or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, that's totally different than researching a substance this person was caught with and is put on trial, and you were going to contribute to their to the verdict. You would want the people to be informed. You would want them to be informed, and they didn't do that because they wanted the maximum amount of time possible, like you were saying. Which Sheena told me that at one point he was facing life.
Wow. That's insane.
Life.
That is crazy. I mean, well, he had a public defender, obviously, so I guess they can only do so much with limited resources. It seemed like he tried to do a lot because he was, petitioning to suppress evidence that would have been found from an illegal search. Well, you were talking before about the whole taillight trick and the license plate light. Sort of made up a reason, it seems like, for him to pull over. And the taillight charges were dropped. That was the one thing the public defender could get out of that. Could they have done something so egregious at that traffic stop that if it were to come out, they would, lose their careers? And would that be an incentive to go beat a guy up while he's incarcerated? Because I'm just wondering what the hell the incentive was to just beat this guy up. Beat him to death, which we don't know if that's what happened, but it seems like that's what happened. Yeah,
it's probably safe to say at this point that
somebody beat him to death.
Yeah, somebody did. It wasn't possible to be self-inflicted. Somebody did this. I don't know, to be honest with you, Brian. I really don't know, because they're not going to come off of that body cam footage and off of any of that. It's been almost 3 weeks. They haven't responded to anything. They're not going to come off of that. The whole thing, and these cops know, even though they're from backwoods, wherever, they still go to a friggin' 26-week training academy. They know what probable cause is. They know constitutional law. They know what they can and cannot do. The whole basis for that traffic stop. So the jury dismisses that. Okay, they dismiss it. The whole thing should have been thrown out because that evidence was obtained through fruit of the poisonous tree. There's no evidence that's allowed to be entered into the American judicial system that comes from an illegal search. That should have been tossed with everything else. So when they got into the vehicle, there was no grounds to search the vehicle. Marshall wasn't intoxicated. Marshall did not have marijuana on him or smell marijuana, didn't smell alcohol. And this guy's a veteran, he's a veteran with keeping things on him. He's not going to have a bag of Kratom that's illegal on the dashboard. So they got into the vehicle some way, whether it was pressuring him into it. Hey, man, we're going to search it regardless. We're going to get a dog up here, use the same old horse and pony show. And, look, Shannon was talking about if they want to search my car, let them search it. They're not going to find anything. Just do it and leave me alone. Like, no, don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. Don't ever give them the ability to do anything like that over you because you don't know what they're capable of. And at this point, are these cops capable of planting something on the family members? Absolutely, if they're going to go this far. But the reason for that traffic stop, I think they're shielding that keeping it to their chest so tight because they know that it's going to come out. They had no reason to stop Marshall, and they set it all up because they knew he was going to buy the Kratom, and they made up an excuse to stop him. They know that, and they know that, they all can get decertified for it.
And just the fact that there's like a history with this particular jail, you wonder if they're just drunk on their own power or whatever, because, it just doesn't make sense. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to just go beat the crap out of a guy just because there's, people are raising questions about this and stuff.
Well, they didn't expect this. They did not expect Marshall. They figured that they got a guy who he's got a public defender, obviously doesn't have a lot of money to dispose, for a lawyer. Doesn't have a whole lot of connections and resources. He's fresh back to the area, struggling, putting his life back together. So they figured that this was low-hanging fruit. They did not expect at all any type of public support for him. And they did not anticipate any of this outside involvement at all.
That's just nuts. It's because, like any little Kratom story, there's a guy in Wales that got arrested for importing Kratom, and he got a fine or something, maybe community service or something like that, because it's illegal up there at the UK. And I did a story about him. I'm seeing everything that comes in my feed, and I'm gonna do this guy got arrested for Kratom. Makes sense that they didn't expect it. They thought they were just gonna make an example out of the guy. But then, that Cressman puts out a press release. Oh, we're getting these drug traffickers off our streets, and it just seems like the community, because the jury, I was so surprised that they gave him 10 instead of the minimum amount of time in jail, because it's. They must buy into this narrative that he was a drug trafficker. He's going to sell it to kids, and then there's this evil, harmful drug that he's using.
It's insane to me. In the South, I grew up in the South, live in the South. You've got the back the blue crowd, and I'm not saying don't support the police, don't go out and support the cops, hate the cops, ACAB, all that. I think that's ignorance. That's just totally stupid. And, those are people that, I don't like those people anyways. But the whole back the blue thing in the South, man, you've got people down here that will not question anything. They think that they've known these cops for, I've known him for 10 or 20 years. I know. No, you're wrong. You don't know him. You've never worked beside him like I have. You don't know what these people do. You don't know that they've cheated on their wife 1,000 times, that they're having a affair with the. You don't know these cops like I know these cops, okay? They're not good people. So you've got people that fall under these false impressions that just because they have a badge, they're okay. And that's not the case.
Like, the whole thing about prohibition that sucks is now that I have my medical marijuana card, and part of the reason I got it is because my wife and I bought a house a couple years ago, we didn't know this, but it was in a neighborhood with a lot of Pittsburgh police. There are neighbors. And I'm like, well, the one thing I do illegal, I can remedy that by getting my medical marijuana card. And so I did. And even I have a friend that's a cop, too, and he comes apart. He doesn't say nothing. Everybody smokes pot, But I worry about getting him in trouble if I'm smoking pot in the same... But it's like this prohibition. Now I don't do anything illegal. Kratom's not illegal. I feel like I can go talk to my neighbors, and maybe if they smell pot on me, there's nothing they can do about it. It doesn't matter. Not that they would. They're nice guys. And it's just this prohibition kind of drives a wedge, sort of, in the community. What do police in general think about, like, take, say, like somebody that's a law enforcement officer for the right reasons? What do they think about, like, somebody that just casually smokes pot, does an illegal drug?
From my experience, I would much rather deal with somebody who's using marijuana than I would a drunk. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I've had to deal with drunks that it just ended terribly. You've got domestics, 90% of those are caused by alcohol.
Yeah.
You've got these issues, and my brother's a cop. We're actually having to do Christmas tonight because my brother's got to work Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. He kind of followed in my footsteps and became a police officer. He's a lot more different. He's very quiet, really well reserved. But I use marijuana, and my brother is completely fine with it. My brother, he doesn't even send anything for marijuana. It's still illegal in Kentucky. It's not even decriminalized. But my brother doesn't send these things for prosecution unless someone's trafficking marijuana or something like that.
Yeah.
He was just showing me some photos the other day of a traffic stop he did on a guy. This is kind of funny. He stops this guy, and man, I didn't even know that you can even still get Mexican dirt weed. Like this stuff even existed.
I haven't seen that in a while.
Yeah. I haven't seen it since I was a teenager, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost 40, and
I'm 46.
My brother shows it to me, and he was like, "Look, man, look at this. Look at how terrible this weed is." And I looked at it, and he goes, "Can you believe that this guy was so worried about this that he's telling me that he's willing to give up who he got it from?" And my brother told the guy, he goes, "You're willing to give this guy up for this?"
Yeah, no. Oh my God!
This mess, and I worked in St.
I'll
Louis.
I'll squeal for dirt weed. Wow.
Yeah, and he was totally willing to do it. And
my
brother
God!
was like, man, I was just writing you a $45 fine for this. He's like, oh, okay, yeah. No, sorry, no, I take it back. But
people need to realize you don't have to tell the police anything. And you probably should just keep your mouth shut. I've gotten out a lot of shit keeping my mouth.
I mean, that's the way to do it. I worked in St. Louis, Missouri. There was a hell of a lot more serious things to worry about than petty drug possession.
Yeah, like I don't care. One of my neighbors, if he's a cop and if he smells pot smoke coming from my house, he's not gonna push away the unsolved murders and gang members to like come up and drag me out of my house.
No, you're right. And here's another thing that's changing a lot of police's view on when I first started in law enforcement. Any amount of marijuana you're getting arrested for, which was crazy then. And I started in 2006. It was crazy then. But police officers have dealt with this fentanyl and heroin just ad nauseum. So it's kind of conditioned them to be like, well, why are we worried about all this other stuff when we're dealing with the fallout from violence from this? We're seeing families, people overdosing and dying. There's no more sons, moms, dads, brothers, sisters. These people are falling over dead. And I'll tell you something. I am really trying to put something together for like a law enforcement liaison thing where we educate police officers on Kratom, because a lot of them, they still don't know what it is.
Yeah.
We explain to them like, look, you guys are so concerned about this heroin and fentanyl and this entire mess that we have in this country with this stuff. This is a solution for that. This is not the boogeyman. This is not the Oxycontin, Adderall love child that the internet has made this, and the FDA and all these different agencies have made this out to be. And this is the answer. And I have told different cops, we were facing a ban here in Kentucky. Luckily, the AKA was able to stave that off. I've got an employee of mine who is a probation parole supervisor. He works for me part-time for some extra cash. Got another guy who's a police officer for me. They both take Kratom. They've gotten off Tramadol. They both were on Tramadol, which is, it's a dangerous drug, man. It has potential for seizures and all this stuff. They've gotten off that, and they take Kratom. So when we were facing that ban, I called the bill sponsor directly. It was kind of shady what I did, but I called the sponsor of the bill and was like, hey, man, you put this Kratom bill together. I'm a former law enforcement officer. I'd like to come up here and speak about the dangers of Kratom. Oh, man, he was all for it. He's like, yeah, man. Yeah, we'll give you a 5-minute speaking spot on the floor. My intentions were to talk about the dangers of Kratom being banned, not the dangers of Kratom. Because I was going to get up there in front of that whole house and say, hey, this is what this is. Okay, if you ban this, there's probably around 300,000 Kentuckians that use this. You're going to see mass relapse overnight. You've compiled a corrections impact statement that consists of $10 million that you're going to allocate for incarceration fees for Kratom. You've already got this figured out for $10 million. 10 million tax dollars you're flushing down the toilet, and you're putting somebody that's not violent in a violent situation where now they're going to have post-traumatic stress or hypervigilance the rest of their life because they have to learn how to adapt and survive in an extremely violent environment, and you're going to put them away for this. This is the success that it's had. And, man, I had all this stuff nailed for just 5 minutes of nonstop talking to go up there. And, I was going to say, like, look, I have dealt with fentanyl on a serious level. Get any police officer just dealt with it. You're going to have people that are going to relapse and go back to that. This is the answer. And, the bill died.
I mean, the fentanyl is just going to get in an underground Kratom supply because some people take it for the same reasons. So, like, once all this Kratom is going to be here, if it gets Schedule 1 nationally or something, it's going to all go in the black market. People are going to take it to try to get an opioid effect. But it's like, it's what they call the iron law of prohibition, where when things are prohibited, it's just an incentive-wise to keep the supply smaller. Like Al Capone wasn't running kegs of beer and wine coolers. He was running liquor because you could fit more alcohol in a truck than you could beer. You could fit more whiskey in a truck than beer. Same thing that's why fentanyl's so prominent, because you could keep as much in your pocket to supply the whole neighborhood versus kilos of heroin in your trunk. So the Kratom's going to get mixed with it. The guy that has some fentanyl is going to sprinkle a little in the Kratom. He's going to have the best quote-unquote Kratom in town, and then pretty soon somebody that's like, oh yeah, my dose is 5 grams, I'll just take 10 of these pills. Well, they'll start dropping like flies, like everybody else who thinks they're getting heroin. I knew a guy who tried to buy some cocaine, and it was fentanyl, and he died. It's just going to add to the problems, for sure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what's going to happen. That's 100% what's going to happen. And what's crazy to think about this is, you think our government, you figure that out. You think our government doesn't know that?
I know, really. I sometimes wonder how involved they're in, like they were during Prohibition, with putting poison in the underground alcohol supply. So I guess people would stop using it if everybody started dying of it. I don't have any evidence for that. That gets into conspiracy territory, but I wouldn't be shocked.
Let's not, get into conspiracy territory, but let's talk about something that really happened, and that's Iran-Contra and where that all started at. That whole Iran-Contra thing is the epicenter was Mena, Arkansas. So Arkansas, and the family told me Arkansas has been like this since the late 80s with the state police, which would all line up to that event. The state police involvement. And I mean, just think about how crazy this sounds. The Arkansas State Police are involved with the moving of cocaine from the airport in Mena, Arkansas, that was flown in to be sold in the United States, and the proceeds from that were going to go to arm Nicaraguan rebels. Like, that really happened, and that was all going on in a small town in Arkansas.
Yeah, I'm looking right now. Associated Press, September 24th, 1991. Yep. Yeah.
in Arkansas. So
That's crazy. I didn't realize. I generally know, what happened, but I don't know the Arkansas connection. That's interesting.
It was Colonel Oliver North. We all know who that is.
Yep.
And this is what brought Oliver North into light was this Iran Contra. And the government, they still, man, if you go back and you watch those hearings on YouTube, a representative was like, nope, that's national security. We're not dude, they would not come off of it. They wouldn't talk about it. They wouldn't admit to anything, but it was shown that it happened. Yeah. Congressional testimony. They started doing some backdoor testimonies and they're like, oh crap, we're busted on this. So that's the epicenter, folks. That all went down in Arkansas. So to think that a man can't be murdered in a county jail, to keep some people out of trouble for doing some illegal activities while they're cops. And the other thing is, Marshall got so much light on him. What else have these cops done in that county that they're worried about all this light being on them now? You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I said, I just did a quick Google search of that prison, and there was just a guy last year that died under suspicious circumstances. There was a state police investigation, and then nothing. I couldn't find anything else about it. You have a Reddit site called Small Batch Kratom.
Yeah, we just review different vendors.
Cool.
Kind of put out what's really good. I like the small batch stuff. I don't have to use nearly as much of it. It's really effective, and we just like to highlight, certain vendors on there that just have really amazing stuff because, you got a lot of kratom that comes into the country and it sits in a warehouse for a year or two, along with 40 more tons. And I kind of like the stuff that comes in directly from Indonesia by, 50 to 100 kilos at a time. The vendor tests it. They test for, all the things that you should be testing for. And it's just really good quality. So we just kind of highlight some of those vendors. And, we've got one vendor that has done so well that they're able to do the AKA GMP and move on up. And that's the goal. They start out, they get traction, they have a really good product, they're successful, and that they grow and grow and grow. And as they're able to grow, they're able to build things up and be a part of the community in a bigger standing.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's good work that we do with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I can put a link to that Reddit page, too. That's going to be the future. I think these vendors got to start just stepping up and doing it because they'll be ready by the time some of this stronger regulations pass and enforcement
Absolutely
comes.
Yeah, that's kind of what some of the intention there is look, self-regulate because you're going to be forced into regulation. And I'm really a staunch libertarian. I believe that in some forms, over-regulation destroys things. But, in order to keep this legal and to keep a lot of these people that are just fanatics about this, that are just obsessed with having another substance that's useful banned, to shut them up and to, actually, and to keep people safe. It's really, that's got to be what's done.
Yeah, because there's a lot of, at least companies, Commonwealth University in Virginia, they just went around to their local shops, bought some Kratom, and they found one had toxic levels of manganese in it. One product was mixed with phenibut that wasn't on the label, that was Kratom and phenibut. And it's just you wonder why some of these people are having heart attacks after they take long-term Kratom. The girl in Georgia with the lawsuit, I feel bad for her because she was taking regular Kratom a long time, and then she got a hold of this stuff that was called Stardust, and I think it was an extract, and then I think she took a whole bunch. She had underlying heart conditions. It's very rarely or ever just the Kratom, but that kicked something in that she didn't know was going to kick in, and she had a heart attack and died. So I think, yeah, we definitely need regulation, and at least for cleanliness, because, the salmonella thing comes up. It's just going to have to be. We got to make sure everybody sells, just like tobacco, coffee. Dr. McCurdy, when I interviewed him, he said, I want to know if I'm getting, I don't want to buy a bag of coffee that has like 10 times the caffeine than my regular thing of coffee, because that might not be good for me.
No, I agree. Yeah,
I hope that happens with Kratom.
One thing that we've been successful in with a page like that is, you'll have some startup vendors, and that's kind of where they gain some traction at.
That's cool.
And I look into them. I dig into them. I've got a verification process, so we've caught two vendors. I'm not going to get into the craziness of it, but there were two people that tried to slip into there, and me and another guy had done some research and done some legwork on this particular vendor, and Reddit has a comment history, and I was reading his comments, and I'm like, wow, this guy seems to like these research chemicals a hell of a lot. And I just kept reading about it on his comments, and this guy's posting photos and all this stuff of the new Kratom he's putting out. And I talked to another guy, and I was like, dude, this is not cool. This guy is heavily into these research chemicals. He could be, not purposely mixing this in there, but man, this is in the same facility as these research chemicals are probably run out of his house, the same house. We got to shut this down. So the guy had sent orders out, and I had somebody that had ordered from him. I sent them a Regents test kit, and I said, dude, here's how you work this thing. You break this glass nodule, you put this substance in here, and then you're going to have a color-coded sheet, and it's going to tell you if there's anything in there. Well, guess what? We found PCP analogs. So,
oh, my God.
Oh, we shut it down, man. We shut that down. So
good.
There was another one that wasn't that serious. It wasn't that we didn't find anything in it, but that's also why I've got that group set up, because there were some vendors that were like, well, man, it's not illegal to have the research chemicals or whatever. It's like, well, it's not. Okay, it's not. But do you want to freaking... Oh, and the guy, I looked into him. I got into his background because I can run background investigations.
Yeah.
And the guy had a warrant from New Jersey for, I guess, certain research chemicals there, since they're so close to the analogs of benzodiazepines are in fact illegal. And I had a warrant out for this guy's arrest, and he's down in Texas as a pop-up Kratom vendor. So, yeah, we were able to square that away and keep law enforcement out of it, because I knew exactly what would happen if law enforcement got involved. They would have a press conference. Man, they would have a press conference, and they would have a table lined out, like the funny meme you see with the Paw Patrol there. They would have it out, and they would say, man, adulterating Kratom with highly dangerous, deadly research chemicals. And that single action right there is enough for the DEA to schedule an emergency ban. Something that simple.
Yeah.
Something that small and minute. If they were willing to do that on 16 people getting salmonella in 2018, I think it was.
Yeah.
What would they do if 20 people had an overdose for PCP? I don't think people realize how on the line the legality of this is hanging.
Yeah.
And it's hanging by a thread. And it's things like that right there that can bring it down.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why there has to be regulation with enforcement too. Like I know some of the laws, there are guidelines and there are first steps, and they're easy to get passed without taxes. But in Oregon, they set aside $1 million something for enforcement of these Kratom companies in particular, and they made it so they categorize one thing as a processor, like the importers are categorized as processors, and then there's retailers, so the processors can sell to the retailers, but the processors are the ones that there's $1 million set aside for. There's about 4 in the state that qualify as process. So it's kind of like, it's like a top-down thing. Whereas I don't think like a retailer should have to pay, $1 million to be able to sell Kratom a year, even online. But I think they should be able. There should be a process by which we know they're selling clean Kratom. And yeah, all these guys are just. Oh, I can't believe like people like adulterate it with stuff. And Kratom is great on its own. Just find a good source for it. Like get a better supplier. Kratom is fine by itself. Good Kratom.
You had a criminal that had some really, just floor sweeping dirt, and we can add a little bit of this analog to it, and it's a stimulating. Like, man, this is good. Well, that unfortunately didn't work out for him. But what I worry about with regulation is that we don't want a lot of Mussolinis and these government officials, like we're talking about earlier, getting drunk on power and just enforcing the hell out of this. We want something to where it's safe for everybody. It's tested. We know that it's good to go. There's proper instructions on it. There's people that are like, get it out of the gas stations. Okay, I can see your point with the gas stations. All right, I can see it. You can still buy whiskey there, which is a lot worse.
Yeah, like in Missouri in certain states, yeah.
Yeah, you can buy it over the counter. But, I can see some of those arguments. But, if we can get the right people in there that know the product, that, continue to do what some of these states are doing, then, it's going to be fine. If we keep bad actors out, that's...
Yeah. And shit, I think you'd be a great guy to lead the enforcement of the, particular companies, especially with the people, you already shut down a guy with the PCP. So that's like, hell yeah, that's what we need. That's the kind of thing we need, because they're just hurting people from their own greed and selfishness. And that just shouldn't happen. That just shouldn't happen. There's a lot of good vendors out here, and they're all being accused of trying to get people hooked on it. Meanwhile, guys I know, they get nothing but positive letters saying, oh, this is good, this saved my life, blah, blah, blah. That's 99.99% of what they hear.
I can't even tell you how many people that are like, something that we do on the side, we'll find somebody who's struggling, because I'll have people message me all the time, and I can usually tell who's full of shit, who's okay about it. Like, hey man, I'm really kind of down right now. I don't want to go back to what I was doing, but I just don't have the money to afford this, and I can go and get a $5 hit, and I can kind of hang on a little bit longer. Like, okay, man, what do you like? What are your preferences? Oh, I like green strains, or I like unfermented red. Like, all right, well, look, if you can hang on for about another 4 days, we'll get you a flat rate package out, and we'll help you out. So there's 4 or 5 vendors that I work with exclusively, and that's out of their pocket. It's out of my pocket. We keep 1 or 2 people basically alive, and also from relapse and going back to a former lifestyle that they don't want to go back to.
That's great. That's a great program. And the doctors cut me off of opioids. I'm thinking about suicide, and wait and let me send you this. So
right.
that's a good program.
And that's what a lot of people don't realize this, man. When you take somebody, I could get tramadol, or I could get hydrocodone, but I don't know how long I would have it, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of nerve damage in my neck and some serious nerve pain, and it's just developed over the years, and it's to do with wearing a freaking 18 pounds of gear on every day and slumping forward. And I still work a lot of posts currently doing armed security, because I like to keep my payroll down, and I'll work those myself. So a lot of them, I've got employees, and we have a really good business, but I still like to be out there and do it. But I'm in pain, and I could go back and get on these medications, but at what point they can just immediately, my biggest fear is having it taken away, and like, man, well, in a week I'm going to be really suffering and hurting. And with Kratom, I don't even think about having to deal with a doctor and those medications, because you're really at their mercy. And that's another problem that we have in this country right now. It's a huge issue of people that actually need this stuff, and they're worried about losing it. Man, I've got a friend who's a cop who got cut off of his prescription medications. My girlfriend and I were at dinner the other night at Olive Garden talking about it. I said, can you believe that he drove to the doctor's house? Man, this guy I know drove to a doctor's house at like 7 o'clock at night and knocked on his door, dude.
Damn.
He knocked on his door. He's like, man, you cut me off my medication, dude. Can you imagine?
Wow.
But that's how, that's just the point there that keeps all that from happening,
Yeah, and I have no doubt that it's kept a lot of people from dying from fentanyl overdose. No fucking doubt. I mean,
and relapse. It just kept so many people from relapse. Like Marshall would have had a healthy, productive life. He would have still been fishing. He would have seen his grandkids grow up. The guy would have been completely fine. He was not going back to this. He might have had some doubts sometimes. We all do. But Marshall had been using Kratom for so long, and he had been telling people about it when he was working in that rehab up in Michigan. He was getting people on it. He was like, hey, look, this helped me. This saved me. Marshall was fine, and now he's dead.
Yeah, that's fucking terrible. It's terrible. Right around Christmas, too, so they can never have Christmas without thinking about this. I mean,
it's hard, man. Yeah. It's hard. It was really hard to sit there, and Mike said the same thing. We had to take a few days off and just not talk about it, just because, man, it's really hard to sit there and this guy's sister and daughter. It's really difficult to sit there and see that.
Please support the family of Marshall Price, the Justice for Marshall Price GoFundMe. There will be a link in the description. The Kratom Science Podcast is produced by me, Brian Gallagher, for KratomScience.com. The music is Risey. The song is Memories of Thailand. Take care.